This is dangerous knowledge, and I need you to understand that before you go any further. What you are about to hear was never meant for monks, wellness influencers, or people looking to relax after work. This was a forbidden survival method used by ninja when capture meant torture, when discovery meant execution, when the only escape left was to convince the world that you were already dead. They called it what we now translate as ghost breath, a method so extreme that it deliberately pushes the body's vital signs toward the threshold of death itself, slowing breath, pulse, heat, and presence until the nervous system registers you as biologically irrelevant. I am not speaking metaphorically. I am telling you that trained practitioners could reduce breathing to the point where fog no longer formed in cold air, could drop heart rate so low it confused touch and sound, could enter a state where even their own mind questioned whether it was still alive. This is why the technique was hidden, fragmented, and erased from open transmission, because untrained minds panic when the body goes silent, and panic in this state is lethal. You live in a body that has forgotten how to disappear. Every breath you take is loud to your nervous system. Every heartbeat is amplified by stress hormones. Your biology is stuck in permanent exposure mode, constantly signaling threat, urgency, movement, reaction. You cannot truly rest. You cannot fully hide. Even when you sleep, your system remains half alert, burning fuel, consuming oxygen, aging faster than it should. The ninja understood something that modern humans have lost. Survival is not always about strength or speed. Sometimes survival is about becoming invisible to life itself. Ghost breath was not meditation, it was not spirituality, and it was not comfort. It was a controlled descent into biological silence, a voluntary surrender of visible life signals, practiced under supervision because one mistake meant blacking out, convulsing, or never returning. I am telling you this as someone who stands between ancient ritual and modern neuroscience because today we finally understand what those warriors were manipulating. They were not summoning spirits. They were hijacking the deepest reflexes of the human nervous system, the same ones that trigger near-death experiences, hibernation states, and extreme survival responses observed in laboratory conditions. This protocol was suppressed not because it was myth, but because it works too well. It dismantles the modern illusion that you must always breathe deeply, always oxygenate, always stimulate. Ghost breath does the opposite. It starves the system just enough to force it into emergency conservation mode, where everything unnecessary shuts down and only core awareness remains. If you continue listening, you are accepting responsibility. This is not relaxation training. This is not safe curiosity. This is an exploration of the edge, the same edge that spies, assassins, and fugitives once depended on when hiding places failed. Most people never need this. Most people should never attempt it. But if you are still here, it means you already feel the problem. Your body does not obey you when stillness is required. Your mind panics when silence deepens. And until that changes, you will never understand what it means to truly vanish. This is the first gate, and crossing it means accepting that ghost breath is not about feeling alive. It is about mastering the moment when life almost disappears. To understand why ghost breath existed, you have to abandon the romantic fantasy of ninja as acrobats and smoke bombs. The real shinobi operated in environments where pursuit was relentless, and mercy did not exist. Castles were searched room by room. Forests were burned. Rivers were probed with spears. When escape routes collapsed, the final tactic was not fighting, it was disappearance. Ghost breath emerged as a response to manhunts that lasted days, sometimes weeks, where the ability to slow the body below expectation, meant the difference between execution and survival. A ninja hiding beneath reeds in winter water could not afford visible breath. One concealed under corpses after a skirmish could not afford a racing heart. In these moments, motionless silence was not symbolic. It was tactical biology. This technique was used to fake death convincingly enough to defeat trained observers. Accounts describe shinobi surviving inspections where captors pressed ears to chests, watched nostrils, checked skin temperature, even waited for involuntary twitches. Ghost breath trained the body to deny all of them. The breath was reduced to near zero not by holding air, which creates tension and panic, but by extinguishing the urge to breathe itself. This is the critical distinction. Holding your breath is aggressive. Ghost breath is surrender. The ninja learned to persuade the brainstem that oxygen demand was low enough to justify silence. That persuasion required years of conditioning, because the body is designed to resist it violently. Modern humans break here. Your nervous system has been trained since childhood to fear any interruption in breathing. You associate stillness with danger, silence with loss of control. The ninja inverted this relationship. They trained calm so deeply that even the most primitive reflexes trusted it. When soldiers searched a battlefield and prodded bodies with spear tips, ghost breath practitioners did not flinch because the flinch reflex had been quieted at its root. When dragged, dropped, or left in cold air, their metabolism slowed instead of spiking. This was not bravery. It was conditioning. This is also why the technique was restricted. Teaching ghost breath to someone who had not already mastered fear regulation was considered irresponsible. Panic during extreme parasympathetic dominance can trigger catastrophic rebound responses. Gasping, convulsions, sudden spikes in heart rate that reveal presence instantly. Infiltration manuals warned that the breath must disappear before the mind does. If the mind collapses first, the body betrays you. That rule has not changed. The modern world has no need for siege survival, but the nervous system has not evolved past these mechanisms. The same reflexes that allowed ninja to vanish are now activated during trauma, near drowning, fainting, and near-death experiences. Ghost breath sits at the threshold of all of them. This is why stories describe it as terrifying, even for experts. Practitioners reported sensations of falling inward, loss of body boundaries, and moments where identity dissolved. Those were not spiritual visions. They were the byproducts of a nervous system switching from survival through action to survival through shutdown. You are being told this not to impress you, but to warn you. Ghost breath was never a daily practice. It was a last resort state, rehearsed carefully so it could be entered without hesitation when everything else failed. The ninja did not worship this technique. They respected it the way one respects poison, powerful, effective, and unforgiving. If you are still listening, understand that this is not about learning a trick. It is about learning why the body is capable of pretending to die, and why most people are psychologically unprepared to witness themselves doing it. That understanding is the second gate, and passing it means accepting that stillness, when taken far enough, becomes indistinguishable from death. Now we move from legend into mechanism, because nothing about ghost breath is mystical once you understand what it is actually pressing inside your biology. At the center of this technique is the forced dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system, specifically through overwhelming activation of the vagus nerve, the main communication highway between your brainstem and your organs. Under normal conditions, your breathing rhythm constantly stimulates sympathetic arousal, keeping heart rate responsive, muscles ready, perception sharp. Ghost breath does the opposite. It removes rhythmic stimulation so completely that the brain is forced to conclude there is no immediate demand for action. When that conclusion is accepted, the nervous system does something drastic. It powers down. This is not relaxation. This is a state closer to what happens during the mammalian diving reflex, fainting, or extreme cold exposure. Heart rate drops sharply, sometimes below 40 beats per minute in trained individuals. Blood pressure narrows. Peripheral circulation retreats from the skin and limbs. Carbon dioxide levels rise, not because oxygen is absent, but because the body is deliberately tolerating CO2 without triggering panic. This tolerance is the hidden key. Most people think oxygen keeps them alive. In reality, it is your intolerance to carbon dioxide that forces you to breathe. Ghost breath trains the body to accept high CO2 as non-threatening, silencing the respiratory drive at the brainstem level. As this happens, your brainwaves shift. Fast beta activity associated with thinking, planning, and fear collapses. Alpha fades. Theta emerges, followed by delta-like patterns normally seen only in deep sleep or unconsciousness. But here is the dangerous part. Awareness does not fully disappear. You are not asleep. You are conscious inside a body that is behaving as if it no longer needs you. This mismatch is what creates the near-death sensation reported by practitioners. Time distorts. The sense of physical boundary dissolves. Sound feels distant, as if filtered through water. These are not hallucinations. They are the direct result of reduced sensory processing as the thalamus limits input to conserve energy. At the cellular level, metabolic demand drops. Mitochondria reduce output. Non-essential processes are paused. This is similar to what researchers observe in hibernating animals and in humans, undergoing extreme hypothermia survival. The ninja did not know these terms, but they understood the outcome. The body becomes quiet enough to escape notice. Skin cools, micro-movements vanish. Even involuntary muscle tone softens because motor neurons lose excitatory input. What remains is a faint internal awareness floating inside a slowed biological machine. This is why ghost breath feels forbidden. Your entire life, you have been trained to associate control with effort. Breathing slower feels safe, but breathing almost not at all triggers ancient alarms. The technique works only when those alarms are overridden not by force but by trust. The vagus nerve responds to perceived safety, not command. That is why panic destroys the state instantly. A single spike of fear reactivates the sympathetic system, floods the blood with adrenaline, and forces explosive breathing. In historical terms, that noise got you killed. Modern science confirms what the ninja discovered through trial and terror. Extreme parasympathetic dominance can suppress pain perception, reduce inflammatory signaling, and alter consciousness profoundly. It is also unstable. Stay too long without training, and blood pressure can drop too far. Return too quickly, and rebound anxiety can be severe. This is why ghost breath was practiced in fragments, never casually, and always with preparation. You are now standing at the third gate. You know that this technique works because it exploits the deepest survival circuits you possess. Circuits older than language, older than culture. You also know why it feels like dying. It is because, in a controlled way, part of you is. The question is no longer whether ghost breath is real. The question is whether you can remain calm when your body begins to shut its own lights off, and whether your mind can resist the urge to scream for air when silence finally answers back. When ghost breath deepens past the initial nervous system shift, something more unsettling begins to happen. Something the ninja never described poetically, because poetry would have softened the danger. The body does not simply slow down. It reorganizes priorities at the cellular and neurological level in a way that feels profoundly wrong to an untrained mind. As oxygen demand drops and carbon dioxide rises, the brain enters a conservation protocol similar to what is observed in extreme trauma survivors and near-death states. Blood flow becomes more centralized. The cortex, the seat of identity and narrative thought, receives less stimulation. The brainstem and limbic structures dominate. This is why people report a loss of self, not metaphorically, but mechanically. Pain perception changes first. Signals still exist, but their emotional tagging is muted. Sensations arrive without urgency, like echoes rather than alarms. This is not numbness, it is detachment. The ninja valued this because pain often reveals presence through reflexive movement. By dulling its emotional weight, the body remains still even under discomfort. Next, time fractures. With reduced cortical processing and slowed sensory input, seconds stretch unpredictably. A minute can feel like an hour or vanish entirely. This distortion is one of the reasons ghost breath was so frightening to novices. Without a sense of time, the mind cannot reassure itself that breathing will resume. At the cellular level, autophagy increases. This is the process where cells recycle damaged components to preserve energy and function. Modern research shows that metabolic stress combined with low oxygen demand triggers this cleanup mode. In simple terms, the body switches from growth to survival. For the ninja, this meant endurance. For you, it means that ghost breath is not just a breathing trick. It is a full-body survival signal. Muscles relax, not because they are told to, but because maintaining tension is metabolically expensive. Even the small stabilizing muscles you are never aware of begin to release. This is why the body can feel heavy, as if sinking into the ground. The most destabilizing effect, however, is psychological. As sensory input fades and internal dialogue weakens, fear loses its usual form and becomes abstract. People describe it as hovering on the edge of nothingness, a quiet so complete that it feels hostile. This is the point where most attempts fail. The mind, deprived of stimulation, creates panic to reassert itself. That panic is not emotional weakness. It is a survival reflex designed to prevent you from entering states where consciousness might be lost. Ghost breath demands that you witness this reflex without obeying it. In historical training, this stage was approached gradually. Students were exposed to stillness under supervision, sometimes in dark, confined spaces, sometimes with cold or pressure, to teach the nervous system that silence did not equal death. Only after this conditioning could ghost breath be extended safely. Skipping this process was considered reckless. There are records of trainees fainting, seizing, or developing long-term anxiety after pushing too far too fast. The body remembers these edges. What you must understand is that ghost breath mimics aspects of dying without crossing the point of no return. The body cannot easily tell the difference. That is why the experience is so intense. The mechanisms that shut down unnecessary processes are the same ones activated when life is genuinely threatened. You are borrowing them temporarily. That borrowing comes with psychological cost if done without respect. This is the fourth gate. You now know that ghost breath changes not just breath and heart rate, but perception, identity, and cellular behavior. You know why it feels like falling out of yourself, why the silence feels dangerous, and why most people retreat here. Continuing beyond this point requires more than curiosity. It requires the ability to remain present when the mind has very little to hold on to. If you cannot tolerate that emptiness, the technique will reject you violently. If you can, you will discover why those who mastered ghost breath were said to vanish not just from sight, but from the world itself. Now you will hear the protocol itself, and I need you to understand that this is not instruction in the casual sense. This is a controlled sequence designed to negotiate with reflexes that normally overpower conscious will. Skip nothing. Add nothing. Ghost breath fails not from lack of effort, but from excess intention. The body must be guided, not commanded. You begin by choosing position, because posture determines nervous system input before breath ever changes. The body must be horizontal or nearly so, with the spine aligned and the back of the skull supported. Sitting upright introduces postural muscle activation that increases oxygen demand. This is unacceptable. The tongue rests flat against the floor of the mouth, not pressed upward, not pulled back. This prevents unnecessary stimulation of cranial nerves that can provoke swallowing or micro-movements. Preparation begins with ordinary breathing, but only for long enough to erase urgency. You inhale through the nose, shallow, controlled, just enough to feel air without expansion. You exhale longer than you inhale, always. The exhale is your lever. Each extended exhale tells the vagus nerve that threat is decreasing. After several cycles, you reduce volume further. Not slower, smaller. The chest barely moves. The abdomen barely responds. At this stage, many people already feel discomfort. That is expected. Do not interpret it as lack of oxygen. It is rising carbon dioxide. They are not the same thing. The critical phase begins when you release the idea of inhaling at all. You do not hold your breath. Holding implies resistance. Instead, you complete an exhale and allow stillness to occur naturally. The throat remains open. The jaw remains slack. The body waits. The first urge to inhale will arrive quickly and aggressively. This is not danger. It is conditioning. You observe it without acting. When the urge peaks, you allow the smallest possible sip of air, barely enough to soften the reflex. Then you exhale again immediately, longer than before. This trains the brainstem that minimal intake is sufficient. As cycles repeat, pauses lengthen on their own. The breath begins to disappear between moments of minimal exchange. Heart rate slows perceptibly. The body feels heavy. You may experience internal swaying, falling sensations, or brief flashes of fear. None of these require response. The eyes remain closed, not focused inward, not visualizing anything elaborate. Imagery increases cortical activity. Instead, attention rests on the sensation of weight, on gravity pulling you downward. The ninja described this as letting the ground breathe for you. Modern terms do not matter. The effect does. There is a point where breathing becomes so infrequent that counting no longer makes sense. This is the threshold. At this moment, you must resist the urge to check yourself. No pulse checking, no swallowing, no mental narration. Any evaluative thought pulls you back towards sympathetic activation. You exist as a passive observer inside a quiet system. If fear spikes here, you do not suppress it. Suppression is effort. You allow it to pass without reaction, the same way you allow the urge to inhale to pass. Exiting the state is as important as entering it. Abrupt inhalation shocks the system and can cause dizziness, anxiety, or tremor. To return, you reintroduce breath gradually. Small inhale. Long exhale. Several cycles. Only then do you deepen breathing and allow movement. Historically, Failure to exit properly was considered more dangerous than failure to enter, because rebound sympathetic discharge reveals presence, both externally and internally. This protocol was never practiced for duration. It was practiced for control. Seconds mattered more than minutes. The goal was not how long you could disappear, but how reliably you could enter and leave without betraying yourself. This is the fifth gate. You now possess the sequence that quiets life to a whisper. Whether you respect it will determine whether it serves you or destabilizes you. Ghost breath does not reward ambition. It responds only to restraint. You will not transform from a single attempt, and anyone who tells you otherwise is lying or ignorant. Ghost breath changes the nervous system through exposure, not achievement. The first sessions rarely look impressive from the outside. You may only notice that your exhales lengthen more easily, that the panic spike arrives later than before, that your heart rate settles faster after interruption. These are measurable signs, even if they feel subtle. Within the first week of careful practice, most people experience a reduction in baseline respiratory rate and an increase in carbon dioxide tolerance. This manifests as fewer unconscious sighs, less chest breathing under stress, and a strange sense that urgency no longer hijacks the body as easily. After several sessions spaced over days, not hours, the threshold shifts. The moment of breath disappearance arrives sooner and with less resistance. Heart rate recovery improves. Cold exposure becomes more tolerable because peripheral vasoconstriction no longer triggers panic. Some practitioners notice that their sleep changes, not in duration, but in depth. Entry into slow-wave sleep accelerates because the nervous system has learned that stillness is not fatal. These adaptations mirror findings in laboratory studies of parasympathetic conditioning and breath control, even though the original practitioners had no instruments to prove it. Weeks of disciplined exposure produce more dramatic effects, and this is where caution becomes critical. The ability to downshift rapidly can create a false sense of mastery. Resting heart rate may drop significantly. Stress responses become muted. Pain feels distant. These are not inherently positive outcomes if the practitioner lacks emotional regulation. Emotional flattening, dissociation, or delayed anxiety responses can occur if ghost breath is used as escape rather than training. Historically, this is why the technique was paired with strict ethical and behavioral discipline. It was never taught in isolation. The ninja evaluated progress by control, not endurance. Could the practitioner enter stillness without tension? Could they remain there without fear escalation? Could they exit smoothly, without tremor or agitation? These were the metrics. Any practice that produced euphoria or obsession was considered a failure, because it indicated sympathetic rebound or psychological attachment. Ghost breath was meant to disappear, not to intoxicate. Warning signs must be taken seriously. Lightheadedness that persists after practice. Intrusive fear, sleep disturbances, or compulsive breath manipulation are indicators that the nervous system is being pushed beyond its adaptive window. When these appeared in training, practice was suspended immediately. Modern practitioners ignore this at their own risk. The body is plastic, but not invincible. What matters most over time is what happens outside the practice. You may find that confrontation no longer spikes your breath. That silence feels less threatening. That stillness becomes accessible without effort. These are the real transformations. The ability to slow life on command without needing to prove it. The ninja did not seek to feel special. They sought reliability under pressure. This is the sixth gate. You now understand that ghost breath rewires timelines, not moments. It reshapes how quickly you fall into stress and how deeply you can withdraw from it. Mastery is not dramatic. It is quiet, almost boring, and that is exactly why it works. Those who chase intensity break. Those who respect pacing endure. Now comes the final challenge, and I will not soften it for you. Everything you have heard so far means nothing if you are unwilling to face the moment when your body begins to mimic death and your mind begs you to stop. Ghost breath was hidden, not because it was ineffective, but because it strips away illusions most people rely on to feel safe. When breath fades, when the heart quiets, when sensation thins out, there is nothing left to distract you from raw existence. No rhythm, no reassurance, no narrative, just awareness hovering over a body that appears to be shutting itself down. This is the moment where courage is misunderstood. Courage here is not pushing forward. Courage is not reacting at all. The final test of ghost breath is not physiological, it is psychological containment. Can you remain present when your instincts scream that you are making a mistake? Can you trust that silence does not equal extinction? The ninja did not ask these questions philosophically. They asked them with blades nearby, with footsteps approaching, with seconds deciding fate. That context forged discipline. You do not have that pressure, which makes restraint harder, not easier. Without external threat, the mind invents one. This is why I warned you at the beginning. This knowledge destabilizes people who are addicted to stimulation, identity, and constant proof of life. If you practice ghost breath to feel powerful, you will fail. If you practice it to escape emotion, you will fail. If you practice it to chase altered states, you will fail. The technique responds only to neutrality. It demands that you let go of the need to be someone while you're doing it. That surrender is what most people fear more than death itself. Historically, those who mastered ghost breath did not speak about it. Not because it was sacred, but because speaking invited misuse. The state is too easy to misunderstand and too easy to romanticize. In reality, it is austere, quiet, almost empty. Its power lies in what it removes, not in what it adds. When you can lower your vital signs without fear, you gain something subtle but formidable: freedom from automatic reaction. You become harder to provoke, harder to overwhelm, harder to detect emotionally and physiologically. This is your final warning and your final invitation. Do not carry this forward casually. Do not teach it recklessly. Do not practice it compulsively. Use it as it was intended, sparingly, deliberately, and with respect for the edge it occupies. If at any point you feel pulled toward obsession or bravado, stop. That impulse itself means you are not ready. If you can walk away from this without needing to prove anything, you have understood it. If you can practice without attachment to outcome, you have passed the final gate. Ghost breath does not make you invisible to the world. It makes you invisible to panic. And that, in the end, was always the true advantage.